Hey Dee, are you done with that cleaning spree you were on? And did you find some treasures?
No, I didn't find any treasures, and no, I'm not done. I found a lot of junk. Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening, and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
My garden grows pretty well. I had a lovely day of rain yesterday, which was Sunday. And I went out to the rain gauge after it had stopped raining. And I looked at that. It's like 0.99 inches. How close to an inch can you get?
Yeah, you can't get much closer than that. It rained here too. Rained here night before last. I opened up the doors and just listened to it because it was one of those like light rains that just falls.
Yes.
I don't know how much we got, but it was lovely.
And it was on a Sunday. And to me, like that was the perfect segue as, you know, summer slowly fades and autumn shows up. Today's high on this Monday we're recording this is only supposed to get to 67 here today.
Yeah, it's pretty chilly. We started out at 52 degrees this morning.
That's
And
chilly for you.
Yeah, we're going to get up to, I think, 85 today, but yesterday was only 72. It was fabulous.
Beautiful, delicious. Anyway, on Thursday, I got a text from the greenhouse that the pansies were in, right when you were texting me that the queen had died.
Yeah.
But I ran down there, so I've got some pansies, and I haven't planted them in the containers yet. That's on my list to do today or tomorrow. And out in the veggie garden, all that rain that we got, boy, I went out there this morning, and the radishes, I sowed those so thick. They have to be thin.
The turnips here.
Yeah, the
Same
peas
thing.
are starting to come up where I'm growing them as a cover crop. So anyway, it's been a decent week in the garden, I'd say.
Yeah, it was a decent week here too. I worked 2 separate days in the garden big time, and I weeded and transplanted plants. And I think, yeah, because that was on my future stuff, I dug a bunch of daylilies and put them in the sale for the club. And the club sold out in an hour and a half. They had timed it for 8 to 2 p.m. And they sold out by 9:30. So it was
A daylily frenzy. It's probably because I put in our show notes that daylily sale was going on, right?
That's probably it. Yeah. And then let's see, I worked on, the weather was nice and cool. I planted a bunch of daylilies yesterday. I'm going to plant some daylilies this afternoon. And when I wasn't working on the house and garage, which I also did last week, because Bill was out of town on a motorcycle ride. So I didn't have to cook supper for anybody. I didn't have to do anything. So I worked my little tail feathers off. I beat my Apple Watch 6 days out of 7.
What does that mean? Tell our listeners, what does it mean to beat your Apple Watch?
I have the health app on my Apple Watch. It's on everybody's phone. And it was my activity level. So my activity level, I beat it 6 days out of 7, which I think is
cool.
On mine, it's 600 calories or something like that.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Close the circles, as they say.
I closed all my circles, which is great because
That is great.
that's how I will hopefully thin down.
Well, let's close in on the flower topic with this quote. How about that first segue, Dee? He is not worthy of the honeycomb that shuns the hives because the bees have stings. Good old William Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'd love to know what context that was in, but that's a good one. So our flower, we decided to do flowers that are stalwarts that we have had forever and ever. Amen.
Yes. And so I'll do one and then you do one, back and forth, back and forth. And so I have had forever Tommy crocuses in my lawn.
Yep, you have.
And they keep dividing, and there's sort of a herald of spring here in my garden. Easy to plant, I think. They're tiny little bulbs, about the size of of a thumbnail or something.
Yeah, they're about a thumb size.
Just shove them in the ground, and mine keep coming back and multiplying. And even my neighbors across the way commented when they see the Tommies blooming in my front garden, because I have a ton in the front flower beds. That's their cue to go down to Florida for spring training for their beloved New York Yankees.
Oh, okay, cool. I think that's funny.
What's yours, Nick? What's your first one?
My first one would be heath asters. They multiply much faster in my garden than bluebird, which is my favorite aster, which is a smooth aster. And then Sheffield mums. They are stalwarts, and they come every fall. I mean, I can tell right now all of my asters are getting ready to bloom, so we're going into fall.
My asters are getting ready to bloom, and I put on my list my Aunt Marjorie asters, which are just tall New England asters, and I got them from her, and she's been deceased for 12 or 13 years. And so I probably got them from her 20 years ago, and they just kind of pop up here and there. And I'm like, oh, there's Aunt Marjorie's asters again.
Mm-hmm. Ditch lilies, which they're the more original daylilies. They have rhizotomous roots, and they are growing underneath a dying oak tree that is slowly dying. And you know what? They're doing really well.
You know, I have ditch lilies too on the side of the house. I have a bed of them, and they are spreaders. They always remind me as a kid when we would see the ditch lilies, we would be going down to the family reunion in southern Indiana. So ditch lilies mean family reunion to me. And they're not a great landscape plant for a small garden like mine, because they bloom for a couple of weeks and then they look terrible. You got to pull off all that dying foliage, and then green foliage comes back. And I'm like, I should really try to get rid of those, but I don't.
That's why mine are growing in this one spot under a dying tree. They're fine there. I do have crummy Kwanzo, which Kwanzo is that double flowering ditch lily that it rode in on another daylily from somebody's garden, and it's trying to take over one bed. And one of my goals this fall is to get it out of there. So that's going to be some work.
Where I grew up, the neighbor next door, and actually next door to my sister now, they had the double ditch lilies. Mm-hmm. And we always thought those were pretty cool. And I should have brought some to my garden, I suppose, but I never did. And I won't now. I won't.
Do not.
I won't.
It's a terrible plant because it just takes over. So I planted some gladiolas many years ago, probably 2007, and they were Atom or Atomic. They're named both in the trade. Uh-huh. Those, I tried to dig them out because they didn't really match anything else in the garden, the shade of red. Yeah. But you know what? They want to live there, so I'm going to let them live there. Tell me another one in your garden.
So I will have to give a shout out to the lily of the valley, which a lot of people say that's an invasive weed for them. I know it's hard for you to keep it growing in Oklahoma. It doesn't like the hot summers.
Okay. Yeah, it's doing all right though.
It likes shade, but I always feel like a little stand of lily of the valley. Again, it's one that goes back to my grandmother's garden on the east side of Indianapolis, and I love it. So it stays, and I would always have it in my garden.
And then I guess the number one plant I have that is a stalwart is the pass along garden phlox that Katie gave to me 30 plus years ago. And it's pink. It's not the purple that everybody sees. And it came out of Louisiana. And it and the bright eyes phlox, both of those, they're just great plants. And they've been here forever. I think Wanda gave me bright eyes.
Huh. So the other plant you're going to oh, Carol, do you have to? I have a little circular planting bed that I call the family circle because my dad's peonies are there. And then at the base grow the wild violets that they're from the same violets that we used to dig from the woods to take to Mom and put in the garden there. So, wild violets, I just let them grow. And if they get too vigorous someplace, I just yank them out. But they pop up here and there, and they're lovely.
I have wild violets underneath a tree where nothing else will grow. And, I have to keep them from spreading into everything else. But
I do let them
keep
spread
on top of them.
Yeah, you do.
I don't let them spread into my paths. That's too much. That's too many violets.
And we both have an indoor plant.
Which one is that?
Don't you have a maidenhair fern listed here?
So my maidenhair fern isn't an indoor plant.
Oh, it's
It is
not?
out
I
in
was
my
thinking it was
garden.
I'm thinking of asparagus fern.
Yeah, asparagus fern is the one that is in pots, and you can either plant it outside for the summer or have it inside. And I've had it many times in the years.
But maidenhair fern was your other one.
Yeah, there's more than one kind of maidenhair fern. Maidenhair fern, the one I have is the one that's real short and it has black stems. It's not doing too well in one of my shade beds because we got a water issue, and I got to get that figured out this fall, and I'm going to have to call and get some help for it.
That sounds like it's going to be a lot of work.
Well, for the people at the irrigation company, yes.
Okay. Well, my other one is an indoor plant, and that's my night blooming cereus, which I inherited from my dad. That has been in the family since the early 70s. And so
Wow.
it's ugly. It hasn't bloomed for a couple years because it doesn't get great care in my sunroom, but you can't just throw out the night blooming cereus. It's been in the family for over 40 years. No, you couldn't.
No, I really could. But I do think they smell really good. So I'm glad when they bloom, if they bloom.
So those are some of the plants that we'll have forever and ever. Amen.
Shall I do the next quote?
Please.
To be refreshed by a morning walk or an evening saunter, to be thrilled by the stars at night, to be elated over a bird's nest or a wildflower in the spring, these are some of the rewards of a simple life. That's by John Burroughs.
That kind of ties into our book topic, but let's move on to our vegetable topic.
Yes.
It is and is this going to be an annual event? It's our big tomato recap. Our big tomato recap. Woohoo!
Yeah, we say what went well,
Yep.
what didn't, and what we won't plant again.
Exactly.
You go first.
So I'm going to say we both like the purple zebra, and not
Great
to get
plant.
the official name. It is an All-America selection. We both got seeds from them and love that tomato. Love, love, love that tomato. It's dark with that green striping, so it's pretty. And, but more important than pretty is it is tasty.
Yeah, very flavorful.
Gonna grow that one every year. It's a medium-sized tomato too. Let's say
Right,
that.
it's not a cherry. It's kind of a salad tomato.
Yeah, nicely sliced on the salad, or I like to cut it into wedges.
It's a pretty little tomato.
It is.
So I'm going to run down my ones I liked. I liked Missouri Love Apple, which I grew from seed. Brad's Atomic Grape, which was really pretty. What a pretty, pretty tomato. Pink Berkley Tie Dye was great. That's another Brad. These are two or three of these are Brad's tomatoes, and he does a lot of tomatoes. So Pink Berkley Tie Dye. Sunrise Bumblebee was beautiful. It's a on the big side cherry tomato. And I would just say that in my garden, the cherry tomatoes really shined this year because it got so hot so quickly.
Yes, and I did well with cherry tomatoes. Of course, I love black cherry. That's my favorite cherry tomato because it's not sweet. It's more tomato flavor.
Right, it's got some acidity.
And then the folks at Berkley sent me a plant for Sun Dipper, which is a new cherry tomato, and it's sort of a long shape. And the first couple of ones would split down the side, and I thought, bummer. But after a few weeks of that nonsense, they have just been pumping out tomatoes. And it's like they said, it's like it's got a little handle so you can dip it in like dip or something if you want.
Oh, how fun.
And up at the greenhouse, they had a trial plant too. Theirs is bigger because it gets more fertilizer. But it is definitely one that is going to go into my cherry tomato lineup. My cherry tomato lineup forever and ever.
So which one would you say no to?
So I'm going to say no to Amish paste.
I've grown it. It's terrible.
And what's wrong with it? That it would split up and down. It just split in half all the time. You would think here's a pretty one, and then you turn it over and it's all split down the middle. And I suppose you could take it in and cut that off, but I'm just like, really?
No, it's just not. There are other tomatoes that you can cook with that are better.
Yeah,
I grew it too. Not this year, and I will never, ever grow it again.
There's another one that I don't know where I got the seeds for this one. It's called Pink Stuffer, and I don't have it on our show notes. But it's got a really thick skin, and it is designed, I think, to be stuffed and baked. That's not Carol. I'm not doing that one again. That was a waste.
I mean, I don't bake and stuff tomatoes very much at all. Like,
I don't
here's
either.
how I eat tomatoes. I either pop them in my mouth as I'm walking down checking all the tomatoes, right? Because they're cherry tomatoes. They're my treat in the morning after, when I'm working. And then I also cut them into slices. And occasionally I'll make a caprese salad. But honestly, I just eat them as fast as they come off the vine.
Exactly. We
salt
should
and
remember
pepper.
that.
We're not going to stuff tomatoes or make paste out of them.
No.
So we're not going to grow those anymore. We're done.
No. So the other thing is we got to talk about how weather affects tomato plants.
I didn't get to say which one I'm not going to grow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please
I am
continue.
not going to grow the cherry tomato Sweetie. Not because it wasn't a prolific cherry tomato or good tasting, but it was extremely hard to pull off the vine.
Really?
Like it was stuck to those little caps, and you would go to pull it and you'd smash the tomatoes. That's how hard it was.
Really?
So don't grow Sweetie. Sweetie sucks. All right, keep going. Weather does affect tomatoes more than you think.
Yeah. So we talked about the splits, and that's disgusting. And it often happens after a big rain, then that sucks up too much water and it splits the tomatoes open. Blossom end rot, which usually goes away later in the season, you're less likely to see that. Sun scalding, which was not a problem much for me, but I know it's a problem for you.
Sometimes, not this year. Because you know what? By the time we had sun scald, the temperatures were so high that nothing was setting fruit.
Yeah.
So
they don't
it
set
didn't
fruit
matter.
above about 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And then diseases. Tomato plants always have leaf diseases, blights, and mine look a mess out there. And part of the reason they look a mess is I stake mine, and I didn't get a couple of the stakes securely in the ground. And so those tomato plants just pulled them over, and it's almost a hazard to go out there if you don't know what you're doing, because those stakes are across the path and stuff. And I got to fix that. But, it's almost mid-September, so there's not going to be time to start pulling them anyway. But I'm like, I got to do better next year.
So I staked mine to that fence that runs down the center, and they all did pretty well. But we also need to talk about a question I got on Instagram. One follower was very, very upset because she basically didn't get any tomatoes this year. And so I asked her a few questions, and she didn't put her plants in until after May 1st because she was trying not to get them washed away because we had all that rain.
Right.
I said, and the wind. We had such bad wind in April this year. I said, you have to put them in early enough, like as soon as you can put them in, you have to put them early enough so that they can get up to blooming size so that you can get some tomatoes before the heat sets in. And she goes, yeah, but wind, rain. I said, I know, wind and rain. And so I'm just going to encourage people, grow them in raised beds or in containers if you can. Because that helps you with the rain part. Then your tomatoes don't get washed away when they're little bitty plants. And also, less bug pressure. I'll just be honest. There's less cutworm pressure in pots. I don't know if the cutworms can't figure out that the tomatoes in the pots are available for cutting. I don't know why, but there's just less pressure, period. Less weeding.
Yep.
I'm telling you, containers are the way to go in Oklahoma. So it's just easier.
Well, and here in Indiana, the problem that people have here is they put the tomatoes out too early and they get frosted, and you can't do that. So
nope.
We don't have near the heat pressure, knock on wood, that you have. So planting well after the first frost is fine.
Well, and we plant after the first frost too.
Not first frost.
Not first frost. That would be October here. We plant after April 20th also, but there's like a small window.
Yeah.
And what you want to look for is consistent temperatures with mornings above the 50s. If you see a week of that here, get those tomato plants in.
Same
as fast
here.
as possible.
Same here, but it's going to be much later than it is in Oklahoma.
Yeah, don't go so much by dates. Watch your weather. I would say that's true of all gardening.
That is
Watch your
true.
weather.
So the other thing that I would say is this next year, I was very successful this year with the ones that I started from seed. And so I will start most of mine from seed again.
Me too.
And then the other thing I was going to suggest was there is a book called Epic Tomatoes, How to Select and Grow the Best Varieties of All Time by Craig LaHoulier. It's from 2014. He is a tomato expert. And
He is. He knows more about tomatoes than anybody on the planet, I think.
He just makes a study of it all. So I'm going to pull that book off the shelf before I place an order. And I think I'm going to grow a few less varieties than I grew this year. I don't need all those varieties.
I'm going to grow fewer too. I've decided. We'll see. I mean, I always end up going up to the Tomato Man's daughter and grabbing some more, but I think I'm going to grow fewer ones. Oh, one more thing. If people are going to grow them in containers, set up a drip irrigation system. You are not going to go out there and water when it's hot outside. You're just not.
No. But in Indiana, we just don't we have heat, but it's just not like you have heat.
No, you don't have heat like we do.
No.
So next week, we're going to talk about what peppers we would plant again, which ones we won't, what did well, what didn't do well.
That is going to be a great topic. So I'll do a quote to lead us into the bookshelf. I would rather be poor in a cottage full of books than a king without a desire to read. Thomas Babington Macaulay.
That's a good one. And our bookshelf this time is Outdoor Kids in an Inside World by Stephen Ranella, or Ranella. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. But I have not read the book. You have read the book, so tell us about
Well,
the
I've read parts of the book. I've skimmed through it. So this author has 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. And this isn't, hey, get your kids to go outside to look at their devices in nature or get them to splash around on a mud puddle. This is get your kids outside to do outside things. So
interesting.
He's got, first of all, he grew up in Michigan and they had a pond and they were constantly fishing. And he currently lives in Montana. And they have a cabin that I think he and his brother bought sight unseen. It's up in Alaska.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where it's like you have to take one of those water plane things to get to it. It's way out there. So he has a place where he can take his kids to really experience nature. So, but he's also lived in New York City. So go figure.
But you can experience nature in New York City too if you make a plan and do it.
Yeah. Well, he talked about rats on the kitchen counter and not just like eek, but like let's figure this out, and pulling lamb's quarter out of the sidewalk and eating it, which that just seems kind of like disgusting. But he has chapters on sleeping outside. And we used to pitch a tent and ask our parents to sleep outside every once in a while. Yeah. And they figured it was a good night if you made it through the whole night. Foraging, teaching your kids how to forage very carefully, I might add. Gardening, obviously, there's one about gardening and how it's important to get kids out there and let them sort of figure things out on their own. That if they want to plant their tomato plant, maybe in a place you wouldn't have chosen, but let them try it.
Well, that's how they learn.
That is how they learn. There's a chapter on fishing and even a chapter on hunting, which has the stories about his kids coming into the camp up in Alaska and seeing like grizzly bears and things like that. And so, you have to balance it. There is danger out there if you go way out into nature. But it's an interesting book, and I think anybody could get something out of some of the chapters, especially if you have kids. It really is like you got to get kids out there to learn and figure out nature on their own, and not always in a controlled environment.
Well,
but nature.
Yeah. I mean, our kids don't even get outdoors anymore, which brings me to, when you were telling me about this, I thought about this campaign that's called 1,000 Hours Outdoors. Megan has been doing this with my granddaughter, Maddie, for, I don't know, the whole year. And she keeps track of all the hours that they're outdoors. And they were outdoors all summer long. They might go out in the morning, but they'll spend at least a couple of hours outdoors in the morning. And Maddie loves the outdoors. And when she comes over here, she runs around in the garden and heat doesn't bother her. And she's just an outdoor girl. And she's very interested in insects and just all those things that we grew up doing without even thinking about it. But now kids don't really go outside.
No.
So I thought that was cool. And then you have a link. So we'll link to 1,000 Hours Outside, which is kind of a neat deal. I keep saying outside, it's outdoors. You also sent me a thing this morning about Mary Oliver.
Yes, and this was Cal Newport, an author that I've always enjoyed reading. In his book, Deep Work, talks about our, our ability not to concentrate anymore, that the constant influx of social media and stuff, we're just not able to think for more than about 2 seconds about anything.
Right.
So I've subscribed to his blog, and it's titled Whitman in the Knapsack, Mary Oliver and the Power of Walking in Nature. And he points to a 2015 interview with Oliver, who said, I don't like buildings. So the one record I broke in my school was truancy. I went to the woods a lot with books, Whitman in the Knapsack. But I also liked motion, so I just began with these little notebooks and scribbled things as they came to me and worked them into poems later. So I thought it fascinating.
I like that she wrote things down and then she worked them into poems later. I thought that's true of all of us. Don't you find that you can think more when you're in the garden?
Oh, yeah.
Like you get that kind of thinking where it's like, there's a word for it. It has to do with horticultural therapy, and I think it's called passive thinking. And it's where your mind is able to just passively observe things because you're involved in activity. Watching fish is kind of the same way. I mean, or chickens. People talk about that all the time. Watching their chickens and being able to just think about other things. That's that kind of deep thinking that Cal Newport talks about a lot. And we're all, I think, everybody talks about it being the next generation that has trouble with ADHD. Well, I think everybody's there now because,
So Cal writes, to wrap this little blog post up, today, as in most times past, there's a lot going on in the world, much of it distressing. We could respond by staring with increased intensity into glowing screens, hoping that the resulting numbness outcompetes the anxiety. Or like Oliver, we could put Whitman in our knapsack and head outside slowly into nature with our minds as our only companion. How about that?
I like it. It's really good.
I like it a lot. So that was our book, Outdoor Kids in an Inside World.
So you want the next quote?
Please.
Life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall. F. Scott Fitzgerald. And this brings us to our dirt, which you got me to go watch, and it was an hour long, and I watched it.
Yes, it was a video with Dr. Dan Potter, an urban landscape entomologist from University of Kentucky. It was put by the Horticultural Research Institute. It was only available for a short time. But he talked about research that one of his grad students did around monarchs in urban environments. And they came up with some fascinating information, which we are going to pass along.
Right, because you can't watch the video anymore. But I learned a lot, and I thought I knew a lot about monarch butterflies. This taught me a lot more. So
Yes.
Per Dr. Potter and also the grad student who now has his doctorate too, they spent 2 years following around and figuring out how to plant milkweed. And everybody get your pencils out or go read our Substack newsletter, because this is deep stuff and it's good information. So first of all, we need 2 billion more stems of milkweed in the environment to support monarchs. And so it's all hands on deck. Everyone needs to plant milkweed. And that means, like Doug Tellamy says, urban gardeners and suburban gardeners are the last form of defense. So we need to all plant, because milkweed has disappeared from the rural landscape. A lot of it is due to farming, and a lot of it's due, frankly, to Roundup. And that's because farmers spray glyphosate on their fields, and it is an indiscriminate foliage killer, and it kills milkweed. Plus, milkweed is not a very desirable plant from a farmer's point of view.
It is not. The other thing that they found out is that milkweed actually likes structured gardens more, and that we should put milkweed on the outside of the edge of the garden beds, surrounded by mulch, so it sort of stands out in plain sight. Because he said that monarchs are visual seekers, so they have to see the milkweed.
Right, and plant it in the same areas, and plant more. Like, you can't just plant 1 or 2 stems of milkweed. You need to plant a lot of milkweed, and it needs, like she said, it needs to go around the outside edge. We were always taught as butterfly gardeners that it needs to be messy and that they like messiness, but he said no, actually they don't. They did all of these different gardens, and they figured out that they don't really want it that messy, and they want it set off. So what I did after I watched this is I went outside and pulled some of my African blue basil that was around some of my milkweed. And then I already had mulch, so they could see it. All right. And then they go ahead.
Well, the north and south access. So they fly from the north, they fly from the south. So to have that line of sight so they can get to it from the north or the south so they can see it. That's important as well.
Right. And I don't think anybody ever thought about that before. So you put your other nectar plants for the adult butterflies in the middle, and then you put the milkweed on the outside.
Yes. And then taller species of milkweed, this is no big surprise, really, get more visitors and caterpillars than the shorter ones. And that would be swamp milkweed, common milkweed, and showy milkweed recruited 4 times as many monarchs than the other milkweeds in their study.
So that's important because butterfly weed, which is the one that blooms with orange flowers and is short, I've always noticed that, it's in my garden because it pops up here and there. It very rarely has eggs. I've never seen them on there. So you want tall species. All right, so here's the depressing thing. Tropical milkweed, which we've been told for a while is not the best one, but they told us in Oklahoma it was okay because it dies all the way to the ground, unlike southern Texas, Louisiana, places like that. They're now saying it's bad for a variety of reasons. And this is new information. And one of the reasons is that it promotes, because it blooms so long, so many butterflies visit it, and it promotes more OE, which even Dr. Potter said, I can't pronounce that word, so let's just call it OE. And that's a butterfly disease, and it is on butterflies. But as the season goes on, it becomes more prevalent in the landscape.
So you don't want the tropical milkweed because it encourages them to stick around too long.
Right.
And get diseased.
Yeah. So there you go. And then this one, you tell that one.
Well, this one, because the European paper wasp, which is an invasive insect, it's not from around here, but it is a predator for the monarch caterpillar. And so people put up those little butterfly houses with the little slits, thinking that butterflies go in there. And they said they never saw a butterfly go in there, but they became home for the European paper wasps, which then were attacking the monarch caterpillars. So we have permission to take out, by any means necessary, European paper wasp, which I do. I know kind of where they nest, and I do take them out. Not always with
an urban problem.
They are an urban
problem. I've never seen one in my garden because I live out in the country. I am lucky because I got enough other stuff out here that's a problem. So,
but they like to nest, like my abandoned mailbox out in the garden. They've nested in there, just sort of like anything that's got an opening. So the side light beside the garage light is not on all the time. They'll nest up in that thing, and so you always kind of have to be looking at these little places to make sure that they haven't been nesting. And as soon as they start to form a nest, if I see it, I knock it down. And I'll tell you though, the sting hurts. So this is one place
I bet.
where I would get that can of wasp killer and shoot it at them from when I know they're in there, like in the early evening when they're all in the nest.
Yeah.
I shoot it, knock it down, step on them.
Right, because you want to knock down the nest even after they're gone because you don't want them coming back to the nest, which is a problem.
So two last things. He did recommend a book that he said he has no affiliation with. It's called Birds in Your Backyard, and we'll find that. Put a link to it. I'm sorry, not birds in your backyard, bees in your backyard. And then he had several websites, which we will also link to, monarchwatch.org, journeynorth.org. So all in all, very, very good information.
One of the best things that I've seen in a long time.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Dee.
I did. I really did. And I really don't enjoy hour-long videos by scientists most of the time. It was a good one. Shall you do the next quote?
I shall. I believe in kindness, also in mischief, also in singing, especially when singing is not necessarily prescribed, by Mary Oliver.
I think she was a little bit of a rebel, Mary Oliver.
I think we're finding out more and more she's a bit of a rebel. So let's talk about our rabbit holes.
Uh-huh. Mine's just about the Queen. I'm all about the Queen. I know way too much about the Queen. I knew a lot about the Queen before, but now I know a lot about the transition of power. And that's very, very interesting, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. That's all I need to say about that.
You can go to YouTube, and they have live streaming of everything, and like live streaming of the Queen being transported from
Balmoral to Holyrood.
Yeah, and it's just like hours and hours of watching from a helicopter, a hearse, and a whole bunch of other vehicles going down a highway that's being blocked off. But
so what I loved about that was that, because I watched a little snippet of it today, what I loved is all the Scottish people who were on horseback who lined the roadway, and all the tractors, a bunch of farmers in their tractors lined the roadway. And I thought, boy, she would have loved that, because she was a true horsewoman, and she also cared deeply about the land, and she was a big gardener. And so I thought, boy, if that doesn't encapsulate her, the only thing better would be if there were like dog owners standing there with their dogs, because she loved her corgis too.
She did. And I always remember, I only watched like the first season or two of The Crown. I've not watched it for several years. But when she was talking to her uncle who abdicated and then, put her in the line of succession, and he was whining about something, and she says, don't you think I would have just preferred to be a country housewife somewhere, like, shut up, Uncle
That's what
David.
she thought she was going to be.
Yeah.
And because she was not first in line to the throne, but of course when he abdicated, her dad became king, and it all went from there. And it seems like it's been a pretty good deal, because I think King Charles is going to turn out to be a very good king, a good transitional king.
I think so. So I saw this and I thought, I'm going to get that out of the library. It's called a book, What Do We Know About Crop Circles by Ben Hubbard. And we'll put a link to it. This is a book that's written for kids, for like a 10 or 11-year-old. And so they say if you want to know more about something, get a book written for kids. But it's fascinating because, the first reference of crop circles was way back in the 1600s. But then there was like this resurgence of them in the 90s. And these two guys are going around trying to figure out what's going on with these crop circles. And then I don't want to give it away. Hoax. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they were hoaxes. Yeah.
Anyway. But
because didn't one farmer kind of figure out that it got a lot of attention, and so then another farmer did it, and
it's kind of like these two guys figured out how to do it, and then I think some people tried to replicate it because they figured out, hey, if I get a crop circle, I can charge admission to go see it, and people would stand in these crop circles and say they felt energy.
Because they thought it was aliens.
Yes.
They thought aliens were doing it.
Or like a magnetic thing in the ground. And there was
stupid.
Some crazy stuff. But anyway, most of them were found in the south of England. And there's even a mention in the book about another book that the two guys that were trying to figure out the crop circles wrote called Circular Evidence, a detailed investigation of the flattened swirled crops phenomenon by Pat Delgado and Colin Andrews. And he put in the book that even the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, had this in her library.
That's funny. So, you also said that a lot of these crop circles were in England, in the south of
they are
England.
in England. Yeah, they were.
That's crazy. Okay. So then you said it got you off track.
Yeah, because then they said, the Queen has this book, Circular Evidence, in her library. I'm like, I wonder what other books the Queen and I have in common in our libraries. And I am sure there is one book that we have in common.
What's that?
The Bible.
Oh, probably so. She was a deeply religious person. So
she was. So, may she rest in peace. That was our rabbit holes.
So I think it's funny that they were both about England and we didn't even confer on it.
We never confer on our rabbit holes.
No, we really don't. We kind of keep them secret from each other.
Yeah.
All right, garden commissions. You've got a busy week. So do I.
I got garden club this afternoon.
Right.
And just, this and that and the other. But I'm going to sort of keep it an hour a day out in the garden to sort of keep things moving along towards garden cleanup. Peppers to pick, tomatoes to pick, radishes to thin. I don't know what. I might start that bed around the mailbox that I'm working on. Mm-hmm. We'll see. It's a busy week.
I have a really busy week. I'm meeting with 2 gardeners in Tulsa. They begged me to come, and they're paying all my stuff to come. So I said, okay, I'll come. I'm going to meet with them. And then I've got another garden coaching consult on Wednesday. So tomorrow's Tulsa, Wednesday's here, and then Thursday and Friday I've got a lot going on, including a funeral. However, I'm going to pull up the rest of the tomato plants, and I'm going to keep on weeding. And I am raising a few monarchs, not many, because they've asked us not to, because the generation that is in Oklahoma and in Texas is the one that flies all the way to Mexico. And they found that if you raise them indoors, sometimes they can't find their direction if you don't keep them in the sunlight, because that's how they orient themselves. Mine are in the sunlight, and I've asked Bill if next year he'll build me an outdoor place to raise them. You have to do it with hardware cloth. It'll be a project for next year.
That is a project for next year. Alrighty then, I think that wraps this up. We want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our new Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist at Substack.com, which is also linked to in our show notes on Buzzsprout.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.